Welcome to the Addicted to God podcast. This is your host, Sarah Schneider. I'm so excited to have you joining me for the second episode of the Addicted to God pod. Today, I am coming to you from a place of gratitude. Thank you so much for your support, your encouragement, and even your advice after hearing my Addicted to God podcast launch last week, episode 1. For those of you who are joining me again on this journey, I again thank you that you're back and that you are as inspired potentially as I am about getting this message out to people who are discouraged, feeling a sense of hopelessness, really confused about what a true higher power looks like, and quite frankly, need to have the one and only healthy addiction, which is God. In reflecting this week and putting into perspective what it means to me that you're joining me on this journey and what the future of this movement could look like, I am remembering a quote that I heard from John Maxwell. I don't know if I can attribute John Maxwell as the originator of this quote, but I will give him the credit because it is him who I first heard it from. That quote is, "People help support what they help create." That is exactly what I see this movement becoming. Those of you who are embarking on this journey with me, that you are entrusting me, or you see something in this message that you believe there's someone out there that needs to hear it, that you would like this podcast, share this podcast, help the message get into the hands of those who need it most, whether it is those who are hurting, discouraged, hopeless, addicted, or loving someone who is. I know this is a very, very difficult world. I know that firsthand because I not only have mentored women in jail for over the last 10 years and have seen the devastating effects of addiction, but I've also seen the harm that it does to families and the suffering that families go through when they know that their loved one is not living the life God intended for them. So, as I mentioned in the first episode, today I want to give you my Addicted to God story, my personal path to how it is I became addicted to God. And I will take you back to my childhood, which is a lot like many of yours, I believe. And I theorize this simply because I hear it in the jail all the time. When a woman sits down across from me, and I always open up with the question, so what encouraged you to invite me to come and talk to you today? And their answers are typically, I grew up in the church, I ruined my life, and as a result, I know I need Jesus. It's true. Many of them do know Scripture. They went to church. They knew the path that they were intended to take. Many of them attributed their moms and grandmothers to being the influence that inspired them to grow and become more of a prayer warrior, or even the person who maybe is just walking faithfully alongside of them through their devastating circumstances. Well, my story is not much different in that I, too, grew up in an organized religion. My mom was dedicated to taking us to church every single Sunday. It wasn't that my dad wouldn't, but he was working 3 jobs just to support us. My mom was active in the choir. She played the violin. And so even beyond Sunday churches and confirmation classes, we were often there for choir practice or violin rehearsal. My brothers and I would scurry around the church playing hide and seek and keeping ourselves occupied while my mom was serving the Lord. Every summer we would go to vacation Bible school, and every summer we would also go to a camp that is still to this day my favorite place on earth and very near and dear to my heart in Pembine, Wisconsin, Lake Lundgren Bible Camp. What was unique about camp is the Jesus I met at Bible camp was different than the Jesus I was introduced to at church. The Jesus at church, I was told week after week that I needed to pray and ask Jesus to come and live in my heart, and I did. But when I went to Bible camp, I yearned for that Jesus, because that Jesus, they told me, was a friend of mine. That Jesus never would leave me. He was always with me. He was protecting me. And that Jesus I truly wanted. I would cry every summer as my parents would drive me home away from camp because there was just something special about wanting that Jesus. But I didn't have role models in my life. After leaving camp, there was no friends that necessarily lived out the type of lives that my friends at camp lived. My parents, did the best they could with trying to instill Christian values into us. But once I hit high school and college, I didn't want anything to do with religion. I thought I had checked all those boxes. As a matter of fact, I love the verse, Romans 10:9, that says, confess with your mouth Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead and you will be saved. And you know what? That's exactly what happened. I did. If you said, can you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord? I would say, yes, I confess. If you said, do you believe in your heart that Jesus was raised from the dead? I would be like, of course. I heard that my whole life. Then you are saved. And I just chalked that off to being, yep, I'm in. I'm going to heaven. But my lifestyle said otherwise. As a matter of fact, I kind of strapped Jesus on like a backpack. And when I was a good girl and I wanted to show people that I was a good girl, I wore my Jesus backpack. But when I wanted to rebel, be sassy, just totally disrespectful to my parents, I would take off that Jesus backpack. And through my high school and college years, like most, we rebelled. I think I rebelled more so out of just the pure desire to be independent, have freedom, and just not be bound by rules. That carried on through my 20s. I was a very rebellious girl. As a matter of fact, I remember a couple of seasons where I'd go to church because, I always thought I should. And whenever I'd go, I just felt very condemned that churches were telling me that my lifestyle just wasn't adding up. It wasn't making the cut. No sex before marriage, no drinking, don't lie, and that Jesus was all we needed. And, friends, in my opinion, were all I needed. A great job was all I needed. A college degree was all I needed. I was really, really motivated to conquer the world. And again, Jesus was my backpack. However, it wasn't until I was 26 years old that my husband and I had our daughter, and we were moving to Milwaukee in the middle of my pregnancy. As we got to Milwaukee, I started to search around for a church. But once that baby was born, I realized I had another human being that I was responsible for, and I wanted to bring her up. The only thing I could attribute to being good about myself was the fact that I was raised in church. Any moral compass I had was truly because I was a church-bound, disciplined, faith-aspiring woman. And so we found a church. After she was born, that was really a pursuit of mine. As a matter of fact, it was my first goal. And I did some church shopping, and I finally stumbled upon one, and I invited my husband to come along with me to check it out. And as we were leaving church service that Sunday morning, I asked him, so what did you think? And he said, it's okay. So I figured, this is our church. I proceeded to go through the membership application and become a member of our church and scheduled her baptism. Well, this was about 6 months after she was born, and I called my mom, fully expecting that she would be ecstatic that we're finally having our daughter baptized. But instead of being excited and enthusiastic like I expected, she was angry. In a way, she said, Sarah, you're supposed to have that baby baptized immediately. And I was like, well, geez, yeah, I know that, but it's not like you walk up to any random church in a new city that you don't have any familiarity with and you ask them to baptize your child. So she digressed and said, I know. We will be there. And of course, I knew it. I never doubted it for a second. But that kind of set me back. I wasn't expecting her reaction. So I figured, well, I'm going to call my mother-in-law and get it over with. So I called up my mother-in-law, and she did not have any enthusiasm whatsoever. As a matter of fact, she said, what exactly is baptism to you? And I thought, is this a rhetorical question? Like, you have 6 children. I would like to think you know what baptism is, but I entertained her by saying, they baptize her in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they sprinkle water on her forehead, and the congregation witnesses it. And she goes, well, I don't agree with infant baptism. I believe a child should be dedicated, and then when they're old enough to profess their own faith, that they then themselves would make the decision to be baptized. My heart sank because I did not expect that reaction, for one thing. And secondly, I was warned that there were people out there that had that belief system. And yet I never had this conversation with my mother-in-law, let alone my husband. So I had no idea. I didn't know that was her belief structure. Well, fast forward, and the day of baptism came about, and I was ready for church. We were about an hour before church started. Our parents were on our way from across various sections of the state, and my husband was still sleeping, so I shook him. Actually, he was my fiance at the time. I should clarify. I was rebellious enough to have a child out of wedlock, a planned pregnancy. So I shook him and I said, honey, I need you to get up. Your mom will be here any minute, expecting he wouldn't get out of bed for my mom. He growled. He literally let out this deep, heart-wrenching growl. I'll never forget it. And he said, Sarah, I would rather have my ankles crushed than be in church today. It was that minute when I just froze. And I thought to myself, Lord, what have I done? I thought this was supposed to be a celebratory experience, that I was doing the right thing and that people would align with my desire to do what I thought was best for my daughter. But that isn't how I felt at all. As we proceeded to get to church, I looked over at my family on my left side and they were glowing. My dad was literally shining. My mom, her grin was ear to ear. They were so proud. And then I looked down on the right side of the pew and there was my mother-in-law. And she was sitting in a defensive posture with her eyebrows grimaced. And if I could read her mind, I was envisioning her saying, they better not put a drop of water on that baby's forehead. And then there was my husband, who would rather have his ankles crushed than be celebrating this day. That was a defining moment for me. I really had to question, what is it I believe? I realized at that time that what I believed was because my parents taught me. I didn't know why I believed it. I looked down at my mother-in-law and I thought, what if she's right? I mean, I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. Nobody's ever questioned my faith. Nobody has ever challenged me in what I believed. And for a New York second, I thought, I'm not going to even entertain what my husband thinks at this point, my fiance, because I knew I wanted to bring up our daughter in a church, but I just needed to know at that moment what and why I believed what I believed and why and what I was doing. So as the offering plate came around, I surrendered and said, Lord, I need you to take my husband, take my marriage, and take my life. I give up. I don't know what's right, but I do promise you this, Lord, I will figure it out. And that is the day that I pursued God. I didn't know what that looked like. I didn't know how to do it. I just took one step in front of the other and followed the path that was laid before me. And the most logical step was to join a mom's group. And that's exactly what I did. There was a small group of us who had young children, and we would meet on a weekly basis, and we would be able to just reminisce about all of the firsts. Whether or not our baby was rolling over, whether or not they were eating solid foods, whether or not they were sitting up or taking their own bottle. So it was a great support system. But one day, one of the women in the group said, I really want to learn how to read the Bible. My ears perked up. Absolutely. Me too. I was thinking the same thing. So the following week, we invited our pastor to join us at our small group, and she brought with her a book. And as she distributed it, this woman who initiated this meeting said, well, no, this isn't exactly what we were looking for. We were hoping you could teach us how to read the Bible. And the pastor said, you know what? Everything you need to know is in this book. Now, I don't remember exactly what the name of that book was titled, but it was something like How to Be a Good Religious Person. It was really perplexing because it made us wonder, why is the Bible so hard that even a pastor wouldn't want to teach it to us? Well, not long after my husband's job transferred out of state and we decided to move to Appleton, Wisconsin. And so here I find myself in a new city, again, no friends. I was grieving, to be honest, maybe in a little bit of a depression in terms of the losses that I had just incurred, loss of friends, loss of a big city and all the fun amenities and things that we had access to that small little town Appleton didn't have for us. It was starting all over again. New churches, new dentists, new doctors, new social circles, new neighborhoods, new streets. One day I was just driving through the community trying to navigate where I was and see if I could get lost and then find myself back home again, however that looked like. And I came across a store called Pages and Pipes. I missed the pages part, but the pipe thing caught my attention because it kind of was nostalgic. It brought me back to my grandfather and the smell of his fresh tobacco pipe. And I thought, for old time's sake, I'm just going to walk in there and try to remember what it was like to be with my grandfather. Well, of course, I walk in and notice real quickly that it was a bookstore that just happened to sell pipes. It did smell like a pipe, by the way. But as I'm wandering the aisles of these books, I happened to catch a glance at Rick Warren's book, The Purpose-Driven Life. The subtitle of that book is, What on Earth Am I Here For? You know what was ironic about that? That is exactly the prayer I had prayed that morning. It wasn't necessarily what am I on earth for? Why did God create me? And what is the purpose of my life? I was just wondering, why on earth am I in Appleton, Wisconsin? But the title was vague enough that it caught my eye, so I bought it. When I got home and I opened up the book, I quickly realized that what they were asking me to do was take a 40-day journey with a friend. And I thought, oh, great. I don't even have any friends. But one person came to my mind, and there was this really friendly woman who seemed to always be at the door greeting me at church on Sundays. So I made a decision that I was going to go to church that Sunday, and if she greeted me at the door, I would ask her if she would do this with me or read this book. So sure enough, just as if it was on cue, I approached the church door, and she came over. Hi, Sarah. And I said, hey, I bought a book this week, but it says I have to do it with a friend, and I was wondering if you would do it with me. And her response was, well, that's very kind of you. I'll have to pray about it. And I thought, geez, what is it with you Christians that you got to pray about everything? I mean, it's a simple yes or no question. I don't need you to overthink this. You either want to do it or you don't. But a few days later, she called me and she said, I think I'll do it with you. I'm like, great. So we scheduled a weekly cadence where we would get together on a regular basis that she could answer all my questions and she could explain some of the things in the book that I didn't understand or wanted an explanation for. She's the first person who ever could do that. How do we know the Bible is real? Who made God? Why did God make me? What are the priorities in my life? And what would God want those priorities to be? It was really a soul-searching book, and it really helped me explore and navigate a deeper relationship with God and remove a lot of the doubts I had because I just never had those questions answered before. So once we completed that book, I propelled myself into women's Bible studies. And I can say that because I didn't know how to read the Bible, I appreciated that the Bible studies would take me into the Bible and they would allow me to explore scripture and read verses and understand them in a greater context and even recognize how they would be applied to my life or how they could be applied to my life. And I would say about 5 years later is when I was in a Romans Bible study and I walked out the door, got into my car, and as I was driving home, it occurred to me, I get it. It all makes sense. The grass was greener. The sky was a bright blue, not a cloud in the sky. The sun was so bright. It was just absolutely blinding. And I didn't realize it then, but I realize it now that that was my born again moment. That was the moment that it all made sense. I had been pursuing God. I had been pursuing truth. And God did exactly what he promises he would do, reveal himself to me. From there, I jumped into volunteering into my children's ministries at the church because I was intimidated thinking, oh no, my kids are going to learn more than me at a faster pace than me because they were already on the fast track to understanding what it meant to have a relationship with Jesus, that same relationship that I desired from Bible camp and now had the opportunity to have more. And that is where my faith really took off because it gave me the opportunity to learn all the Bible principles through the lens of a third grader. The simplicity, the application, the comprehension just all made sense. And I felt head over heels in love with God. And that is, in essence, how my Addicted to God story began. I appreciate you listening. I hope we found some parallels in our stories and that there's some likenesses in our journeys, or somebody who maybe possibly shares a similar past than I have. I'm going to continue to deepen this story and share more about myself. And the next episode, I actually want to get a little bit more vulnerable with things that I have struggled with, addictions that I have had. And I'll unpack a little bit deeper about how Addicted to God has truly saved me from destructive paths. Until then, I do hope that this message has inspired you and you would like it, share it, or comment on it. Help get this message out there. I don't intend to make these videos long. I don't think listening to me talk for an extended period of time is where the benefit will be. I'm excited to celebrate my 10th episode, 100th episode, 1000th episode. But sincerely, I hope to be able to interview guests and share true testimonies of how God has transformed lives. But thank you for being on the ground floor with me. Thank you for being a part of this movement. And thank you for being a part of getting it out there to the rest of the world. May God bless you. And until next time, have an incredible God-filled life.